Another year in Melbourne and another PAX has come and gone, and as I've said in the past, I think PAX is the best gaming convention that Melbourne has, as well as the best convention in general, and I still think this, where gamers come together, they play video games, they maybe pick up some board games or some tabletop games and head to panels and have overall a good time. But this year's PAX, it was a little bit different, and I'll come back to that a bit later, but what was there for 2025 and should you go to next year's PAX? Well, when you're walking through the front doors, you'll head straight into the indie game area, and honestly, you cannot miss the giant Nintendo booth front and center, and this was the first place that I went to. Now, as someone who plays a lot of games, I actually have not checked out the Nintendo Switch 2, and decided to jump on and play Pokemon ZA, and I gotta say, I'm not really a Pokemon player, and I haven't played Pokemon in some time, since probably I think Sword and Shield, and I barely remember playing it. But from the gameplay of ZA, it was kind of refreshing. For the brief 20 minutes that I played with the demo, it actually kind of had me tempted to turn around and buy a Switch 2. But Nintendo also had Elden Ring running on the Switch 2, and from what I heard, it was running pretty damn well, and also it was quite impressive. Nintendo also had Mario Kart tournaments, a store where yes, I was contemplated to get the Switch 2, but what was missing from previous years in the Nintendo booth was like the cool collectible or toy store, where one previous year Nintendo had plushies and other items that you could get. And it was kind of like this cool, unique purchase that you could get from sort of attending a PAX, but this time around it was just you can buy a Switch here. But Xbox had a booth set up showcasing that nearly everything is an Xbox. It had consoles and PCs, but most importantly, it had the Xbox ROG Ally. I was pretty keen to check that out, but like a drunk at a McDonald's, I was pretty disappointed once I actually got my hands around it.
And cut.
Now, in hands, the ROG feels comfortable at first, but it felt like it was a handheld that was a bit too top-heavy, and after a couple of minutes, I noticed that personally, my wrists were starting to strain just a little bit, but if you've got the ROG Ally in your lap, it'll be fine, sure, but if you're actually sitting holding it in front of your eyes, I feel like you'll notice the weight a little bit. But what I found completely baffling for sort of the first hands-on playthrough that, people in Australia got to check out with the ROG was what games were installed. Now I got to check out the Xbox ROG Ally, the standard white one that goes for $1,000 here in Australia, and this unit was running Silksong. Now it is a brilliant, vibrant game for a handheld, sure. The buttons were responsive, the speakers and volume was loud, which was great, but for whatever reason, the staff at the Xbox booth only had Silksong installed on the ROG Ally. And when I asked to check out some other games that wasn't a 2D platformer and wanted to look at something like, say, Forza, Indiana Jones, something that had a bit more graphical power to Silksong, they said, sorry, we only have Silksong installed on this. It'd be like, say, you want to test drive a Mustang, but they only let you drive down a road that is 10 miles an hour. And as someone who's currently in the market for a handheld device so I can work on my retrospectives on the go, this, alongside with the top-heavy nature of the unit, completely turned me off buying one. But the other main big booth that had my attention at PAX this year was in the tabletop area of Warhammer, and seeing due to the popularity of the Warhammer video game of Space Marine 2, whatever Henry Cavill is giving us with the Amazon series, and my personal love for the IP, I knew I had to check it out, but it was a bit underwhelming in some ways. Now, firstly, it was a giant stall with a small area for staff to show like new players how the game works. Basically, you get the exact same thing if you go into a Warhammer store that is scattered across the world. Secondly though, there wasn't really anything special there. Now, there were some special single models for like Gene Stealer cults, and I think it was Skaven for the Age of Sigmar. I honestly can't remember, I'm not an Age of Sigmar player, but these models weren't really anything to be sort of excited about. However, the Warhammer store did have third-party items like the Merchoid Warhammer ties, or the bottle openers, or some t-shirts, or the McFarlane action figures, which were generally some pretty cool stuff. However, the Warhammer stand was attacked when PAX opened on the Friday, with all the exclusive items like the bottle openers, the toys, hell, even the shirts completely gone, and they were not being restocked.
Something's missing.
Something's missing, all right.
Now, I was lucky enough to grab some stuff before it was all gone, but it was sort of like seeing an Orc War just go straight for the PAX booth, or straight for the Warhammer booth on the Friday of PAX, and then that Warhammer booth sort of turned into a bit of a ghost town. Now, no other stores also really had Warhammer 2 if you're like looking around for a bit of a bargain like I was like last year. I was looking to pick up the Horus Heresy box set, but everywhere else inside PAX was like a little bit too scared to stock Warhammer with a Warhammer tent here, and most of them didn't bother with it. Now, outside of Warhammer, Nintendo and Xbox, Cult of the Lamb had a fantastic booth that was popping the entire weekend for the new DLC, Woolhaven, with a merch tent that was restocked and sold out throughout the weekend. They also had some claw machines, some hands-on times with the game as well. Now, Bethesda had a cool Fallout-themed food stall area in the main hall, making it this like Fallout-themed diner with a suit of power armor, a hacking terminal, and prizes to win in the claw machine. Now, there were loads of different stalls doing F1 racing trials, but I did actually check some of these out, and I noticed they actually had a bit of a weird setup. Like, they would do automatic only, so you couldn't actually go in and change the settings, but then they turned the force feedback off on the steering wheel. So like, you were a bit confused, and by the time you start to get used to actually driving the car, they'd go, that's it, you've done your laps, off you get. But in the tabletop area outside of Warhammer, there was of course Magic the Gathering and Spider-Man, and it was kind of cool to see so many retailers selling Spider-Man, Lorcana, or well, just board games and sleeves and deck boxes. And with the announcement of Ninja Turtles and Magic the Gathering, there was a Ninja Turtle box, and I had to get that for the upcoming Commander deck. But the biggest thing though that stood out at PAX, more so in a negative way, was Crunchyroll and the vacant spaces they had in the hall. Now, Crunchyroll is an anime store, an anime sort of streaming service, and they had a small shop front where you could purchase anime figures, and then a giant space to take photos against a photo wall, and that was it. But the weird thing was as well is Crunchyroll had prime real estate on the show floor, and I think this would have been great for like Ubisoft, Bethesda, hell, even PlayStation would have had a really cool booth in this position, because for conversation's sake, if Bethesda did a workshop with power armor, Fallout 76 DLC hands-on, and some stuff for Season 2 of the Fallout show, it would have been pumping. But Crunchyroll at PAX was like seeing a teacher outside of school. You're kind of sitting there going, what are you doing here? I think what PAX Australia is missing though, now if you want to include stores that are at PAX like King's Comics and Nat's Hot Gift and Collectibles, Disney had the Disney store, and even Black Milk was there, the clothing brand. They had this cool Fallout themed clothing options, but it's take some ideas from the now gone DreamHack, add in an artist alley, and either put it out in the main hallway walkway or inside the sort of the main hall by the walls of the door. Now, going to PAX and then say playing the new Mario golf game and then seeing artists with some great Mario prints, they kinda go hand in hand. More so than say playing the new Xbox handheld and then going and buying a Superman comic.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but that's not a bad idea.
All in all though, how was PAX 2025? Well, it was good, sure. Nintendo had a massively impressive booth. Xbox had this idea of walking inside a giant Xbox with its booth design, and it was actually kind of a cool feature. The tabletop area had anything a nerd could ask for, from dice, minis, card games, slabbed single cards, and more. And if you go to PAX to meet with friends, to get your hands on new games before you then pull the trigger on should you buy them, even if you want to go to PAX to start new hobbies, just come together and going into the hall, or even don't go into the hall, there's always something to do at PAX. But one of the reasons why I absolutely love PAX is the people. Now, quick story, but on the Sunday of PAX, I took Mrs. Duty and Little Duty into the hall for about an hour, just so they could see what it's about. And while it is a lot of people, it can get loud, and yes, it is a bit daunting for a 10-month-old and my wife who isn't a nerd. I was walking around and a massive Warhammer pin fell off my backpack, and I had 3 completely random people from 3 completely different directions race towards me to tell me I dropped my pin and handed it to me. And I honestly can't think of another convention that would have something like that with its with the people who attend like everyone there was super friendly, no issues whatsoever. And that just kind of sat in my head for a bit and went, this is why I love PAX, it's the people. But if you're interested in video games, tabletop games, or just going to a convention with like-minded enthusiasts, yeah, when PAX 2026 rocks up, I'd say give it a look. But whether you're excited for PAX every year just so you can have a calzone, or you're wondering why King's Comics attends a video game convention every year, always remember to play with each other and play with yourself.